Chris Farrell is a special friend of Encore Palm Beach County. We've done a number of programs with him, and he has been our keynote speaker for our Wisdom and Experience Awards event last October. Chris is economics editor of Marketplace Money, a nationally syndicated 1-hour weekly personal finance show produced by American Public Media. He's also an economics correspondent for Marketplace, the largest business program in broadcasting, and chief economics correspondent for American Radio Works, the largest producer of long-form documentaries in public radio. Well, I didn't know all that, Chris.
And some of those have changed since things have gone into the graveyard of journalism, but I'm still with Marketplace and Minnesota Public Radio and write a weekly column on personal finance for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune and write about aging and all kinds of topics related to aging for MarketWatch and PBS Next Avenue.
Yes, I see many of your articles, Chris, and you're also the author of 2 books, Right on the Money and Taking Control of Your Personal Finances and Deflation and What Happens When Prices Fall. And Chris is a graduate of Stanford and the London School of Economics. So anything you would like to add to that intro that I didn't mention?
The only thing is I wrote 2 books that are more on the topic that we're talking about, Unretirement,
Yes.
Which came out in 2014, and that's about the economics of an aging population, and then Purpose and a Paycheck, which came out in 2019, and that deals a lot more with entrepreneurship and aging.
And I've read them all. And we've shared them with our audience. So today, the focus is on saving for retirement in various ways. And the issue that we wanted to talk about first was how many American workers are benefiting from employer retirement programs. Now, for most workers, retirement savings either comes from individual contributions to a retirement account or employer-sponsored programs that encourage saving. But you have pulled together some data that was created by another economist, John Sabelhaus. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Right. Yeah.
Of the Wharton School of the University of Florida on that finds that almost 48% of workers in our country are not covered by a retirement plan at work. And also that there's great disparity based on race, gender, and education. 76% of workers with less than a high school education aren't covered, with 63% of Hispanic workers and 53% of Black workers not covered. Was that a surprise to you, Chris?
You know, the thing that was not a surprise, what I would say is what was interesting, and it was working with AARP, was it's surprising that there isn't like one place that you go and, go on your computer and you can sort of say, so how many people are covered? So we actually had to take 3 different data sets and then you stitch together the data, and it's really hard to do. And they did a terrific job. And so I wasn't surprised about the data, but what I'm glad about it is that this data is out there, and with good data, then we can really focus on, there's sort of 2 big issues when it comes to retirement savings. One is we have a system that's dominated by 401ks, and there are flaws to the 401k model. But if you have a 401k and you work at a company that offers one, you're saving for retirement. There's a second issue, which is it gets to that nearly half of workers don't have access to any form of retirement savings at work. And the data is very clear. If you have access to a retirement savings plan at work, you're saving for retirement. You may not be saving much. You may be saving in some of the wrong products. There can be all kinds of things, but you are saving for your retirement. And if you don't, very few people are actually saving for retirement.
And also, in addition to that dismal information, I might add, is that the bulk of people no longer are getting traditional pension plans from
That's right.
employers.
Yeah.
And even those that did are experiencing adjustments in them,
Yeah.
changes that aren't necessarily in their interest. And many employers who funded a health care plan in retirement have stopped doing that too.
That's right. And, and you just have to expect, at least in the private sector, that's going to continue. And, it's for a variety of reasons, but basically the plans were too expensive. And, but unfortunately the plans were too expensive. So and I think there's actually good evidence for that, but they put too much risk on the individual to make decisions about how much to save for retirement, where to invest this money. I mean, the individual now is absorbing a lot of the risk, but from a public policy point of view, at least they have retirement savings. They have a 401k, they have a 403b. And I think the big concern are people who, reach into their 60s and, they never had access to a retirement savings plan at work. They probably have had a low and unstable income, and Social Security is the retirement savings plan.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because I know that even back in, say 2010, when I was working with clients at Ameriprise, there was anxiety about whether Social Security would be there. And there's hardly a day that goes by that you don't read something about, it's not going to be there. Do you have an opinion about that? Since that is, we used to talk about saving for retirement being like a three-legged stool.
Right.
There was the 401k or 403b. There was personal savings in various vehicles. And then there was Social Security. And I think people, it makes them very anxious to read these articles that say, it's going to run out of money. What do you think about all that?
I think that the anxiety is understandable, and I'm not sure whether it was Metro Goldwyn Mayer or it was Mark Twain or somebody completely obscure who said never make forecasts, especially about the future. However, I think the safest forecast that anyone can make is that Social Security will be there. It is simply the bedrock toward the retirement savings in the United States. And when you can look at the Pew Research Survey data. Doesn't matter which political party you are associated with, a majority of people support and believe in Social Security, do not want Social Security to be cut. So the unfortunate thing is the way that Washington works these days, and probably hasn't changed that much really over 200 plus years of history. We have this funding gap in Social Security. As a percentage of our economy, it's a very small funding gap. And it's going to be closed, but it won't be closed probably until the day of reckoning. So right now that's 2034, 2035, actually it's 2036 because that extended by 4 years. It's not that long from now. If we crash through that funding gap, 3/4 of benefits would continue about 80% of benefits would continue, but nobody wants benefits to be cut by 20%. So a crisis has the power of concentrating minds, and the dependency of the American retiree on Social Security is so great that I actually think it's doing a disservice when people say it's not going to be there when I retire.
Absolutely.
It will be there when you retire. Perhaps it gets changed in some ways in the future. Maybe it gets more generous, maybe it gets less generous. I don't know which way. I have a feeling it's going to go in the more generous direction than in the less generous direction. And I think that's been, I don't know if you noticed, but there was a period about 25 years where the conversation was we need to cut back on Social Security. You're not hearing that as much anymore. We're living in tough times. I don't think that message is resonating. People are relying on it. So my forecast is that Social Security will be there. It will be there for the younger generations. Perhaps it will change at some point in the future in the way it's designed, but it will continue to be there.
Not to get into a political debate, Chris, but isn't it true that whatever the funding gaps are that exist to keep the trust fund fully funded they're fixable? I
Yeah.
mean, you just need, well, I know people don't like to hear this, you just need to tax people more while they're working, which is what they pay to help provide for it when they're older. And also higher income people could pay more. Well, there are a lot of things that could be done, all of which are uncomfortable for somebody.
Right. But that's why this Congressional Budget's Office a couple of years ago, probably now about 5-6 years ago, came out with 26 things, 28 things that you could do to close the funding gap. And it's really a classic case of then, political negotiation. Tax increases is going to be part of it. More than likely, the main tax increase will be by eliminating the cap on Social Security payments or raising the rate at which Social Security payments are done up to the cap. United States is the only major industrialized nation that has a cap. And so my guess is, I don't think the cap will be eliminated, but that's going to be a major part of any negotiation. But again, as a percentage of our economy, it's not that big a deal. For Congress in negotiations, it's going to be a very big deal. But for the recipients, the participants in the Social Security system, which is 96% of the American workforce, the outcome of that negotiation is really significant. And again, that's why I think it's going to be there.
Well, I don't want to be too flippant about it all, but when I was talking with my clients about this issue, I said, with the growth of the population of people over 65 in this country, I think politicians would be very foolhardy to limit benefits. They will have to find a way. And so I always tell my clients, stop worrying about it. Let's focus on things that you can do something about.
Mm-hmm.
And so in terms of doing something about, the study that you looked at said there were differences in people's ability to contribute to a 401k from state to state. And particularly you cited the difference between states like Florida and Pennsylvania. In Florida, the study mentions that 59% of workers in Florida are not covered by a 401k, while in Pennsylvania, 41% are. And so why is that? Why the discrepancy between states?
So the study didn't actually deal a whole lot with that. I talked to the author. So, I said, so what is your speculation? And I think there were a couple of reasons. One is Pennsylvania historically is a unionized state. The unions have a stronger position, more manufacturing history. So that's one reason why. And also, I think more bigger companies. The other thing is that Florida has a lot in the hospitality and leisure industry. So there's a lot of very small businesses in those industries. And historically, they have not provided their workers with a retirement savings plan, a 401k, whatever type of retirement savings plan. But the study itself didn't go into a whole lot of work. But if you think about where does this gap really exists? And the gap really exists for people who are working for relatively low wages, for inconsistent wages. And just the structure of the Pennsylvania economy versus the Florida economy and when they developed, I think for historic reasons, there's more coverage in Pennsylvania than there is in Florida.
So is there anything that can be done by various states to correct this problem rather than just leaving it to the private sector?
Well, one of the reasons AARP came up with this data set is that they want to take it then to Florida and other states and say, look, we have this model. It's been unveiled most notably in Oregon, which is called state-sponsored retirement savings plan. Because for starting back in the Carter administration and then every administration since then, there's always been this movement that never gained momentum to create a national IRA, a national 401k. And there are different design details, but always the core idea was you have Social Security, you would have a 401k or an IRA on top of your Social Security, and you could make contributions that way. Or you might open up the federal government's thrift savings plan, which is the largest thrift savings plan in the country. Ideas like that never went anywhere. So then there's this state-sponsored retirement savings plans started to take off, California and Oregon most notably. And the thing what a state-sponsored retirement savings plan does, it's targeted at small businesses. It's targeted businesses that don't offer their employees a plan. It builds off of the payroll system that they're already participating in. So there's not that much more paperwork, and there is no match. So they don't have to put money in there, but it automatically signs up their employees into this plan. And the research that's coming out of Wharton, different set of economists, but there's some recent studies coming out of Wharton because Oregon's the longest plan that's been out there, and it is having an impact in terms of retirement savings. So since the federal notion of everybody participating in a universal retirement savings plan on top of Social Security has gone nowhere, there now is more effort targeted toward these state-sponsored retirement savings plans. And typically what these are targeted toward are employees. So this is not the self-employed. This is an employee, typically of a small business without a retirement savings plan, and usually earning a relatively low wage.
Well, I think the big thing with that is it doesn't require an employer match, which is what really stalls most people, most small businesses participating in a retirement plan. So in Congress, I believe that right now there is a legislation to automatically enroll workers in 401ks. Right now, it's at least in most of cases, the employee has to opt into participation. Is that not correct?
Well, they've been moving more and more toward automatic. So this one would just sort of say, look, anybody signs up, anyone you hire, they're automatically enrolled in your 401k. There's been some different, most companies are now doing it anyway. At this point, this would just make it, that's the benchmark, because the gap is almost 40 to 60 percentage points. If you voluntarily join your 401k versus automatically enrolled, it's about 90% of people when you do automatically enrolled, because hardly anybody opts out of it. You always have to have that option of opting out. That is available to everybody. But it just turns out the way we sign our papers and the way we think, if you're automatically enrolled in it, I mean, it's been a no-brainer in a sense if there's a match, because that's why wouldn't you take your employer's money? But even if there's not a match, you will now be automatically enrolled. The other thing that will come out of this plan is it's going to increase over, I can't remember, is it out to 2030? I think it's 2030, but it's going to gradually increase the age where of required minimum distributions to age 75.
Okay.
Which currently is 72.
And how would that work if you automatically enroll every worker and the employer does the employer have to have a match in all those plans?
No, they do not.
Even if it's a large company?
There's, as far as I know, there's never 100%. There's always like 96%, 98%. I'm never quite sure why. But I'm not aware of any large company that does not offer a match. I'm sure there's one out there, but every large employer does offer some kind of a match. There can be a big gap in whether it's a 3% or a 6% match. There's some companies that offer 2-for-1 matches. I mean, there's variety in what is your match, but I'm not aware of any big company that does not offer a match. And if they don't, they probably have something else like a stock sharing plan or profit sharing plan, which would be the reason why they're not doing a match.
And would part-time employees be covered automatically?
So the number of part-time employees that will be covered is a dramatic increase. And I believe, and I would have to check this, but I believe now it's like 24 hours part-time employment. It used to be 32 hours. So it's been dropped, and you don't have to put the part-time employees right away into the plan, but I believe it is shortening the time frame before the part-time employee. So if it's 2 years now, it's 1 year. It's in that range. So this is, again, very important to get more part-time employees into the plan.
Thank you, Chris. What I want to do next is Karen Roberts shared with us a number of slides from Transamerica's report. Transamerica, for those who don't know, is a major insurance company. And they have a report on the retirement outlook for American workers in 2021. So Chris, can we start those slides, please? And I'll just I'll give you enough time to look at it quickly and make some comments and move on. We don't want to be spending too much time on this. Okay. So as Chris mentioned, a lot of workers are not covered and do not contribute to a retirement plan. And I'm sure that even if they did, they may not be contributing as much as they would, because during the pandemic, obviously, almost everybody has been impacted in some way, whether they lost a job, they're working fewer hours, the cost of everything has gone up. So people without understanding, and this is the thing that always bothers me, people without understanding what the consequences will be long-term make adjustments to their savings plan. So just to keep it simple, if they were contributing 6% to get the employer match, they may have lowered it because they have other financial pressures on their budget, but they don't have any idea of what that's going to mean 20 years from now in their savings plan. And I think there's been a fair amount of documentation that credit card debt has increased during the pandemic. Christine, the next slide, please. So a good thing is that many people are now focused on paying off debt, primarily credit card debt and things like that. And a focus on paying off debt is a good thing, but somehow, even while people are doing that, they need to continue to save for retirement. And a lot of people have a hard time understanding that the two things need to happen simultaneously. A focus on just one thing is not good. And this is why it's important to work with a planner who can help you think about all these things. Christine, the next slide. So when I was a financial advisor, we would help people create a cash reserve to continue to cover 6 months of living expenses in case they lost a job, or so they wouldn't liquidate investments in a down market to meet living expenses. Now, the figures here show that only workers have saved only $5,000 in emergency savings that would probably get you through 2 months of unemployment or other problems. And when I was working with people, they say, "Oh, I don't need all that much. My money should work for me. It should be in investments." But you know, emergencies happen. I mean, you're driving home from work and you're in a car accident. The car is totaled. You got to buy another car. You have medical expenses and so forth and so on. And you're not able to work for several months. Not everybody has a nice medical plan at work that will cover all those expenses too. So people are very unrealistic about this. But this is something that can be funded automatically and have a strategy for doing it. And I think a lot of people don't understand the importance of it. Christine, next slide, please. Well, everybody's afraid of running out of money in retirement. And there's a very big likelihood that many people will. I lose sleep over it because I wonder, well, what's going to happen to them all? How are they going to survive? What's our society going to do to help them? So I think as a society, we're very unrealistic about the future costs of anything. In fact, I think generally speaking, our society is focused very much on short-term profits and not long-term consequences in many areas of our social life. Christine, oh, you've moved ahead. Okay. So in addition, some people have saved for retirement. Now that figure of 93,000 is it's an average, a median, which means that some people have saved a lot more and some people have saved a lot less. The fact of the matter is probably most people do not have any idea of whether their retirement savings, even if they are in a 401k, will be enough. And increased longevity means that people are going to be living in retirement, maybe 20 or 30 years. And when I worked with clients, I would do financial projections with them, showing them living to age 100. And they'd all say to me, "Oh, Rosemary, I'm not going to live that long." Well, you don't know, and I don't know. Why don't we do the projections to see if you're going to be okay if you live to be 100? And if you're not going to be okay, let's save a bit more. And if you don't need it later on, you can always go on a trip around the world or leave it to your kids, So I'm just saying that a lot of people have no idea of what they're doing will be enough. Christine, the next slide, please. Workers concerned about debt, and I said this a little earlier, will often focus on eliminating it. But then if they are not doing anything about saving for retirement, they're losing time. And anybody who's worked with a financial advisor knows that time lost in starting to save for retirement can never be made up later on unless you save a lot more. And so somehow people need a good plan that works on both paying off debt and saving for retirement. And I can't get into it right now how you do that, but that's why you work with a financial advisor who shows you do it. I guess you do it bit by bit, Okay, Christine. All right, this is a biggie. Almost half of workers agree with the statement, I don't have enough income to save for retirement. And this, I think, is partly because, and I don't want to get into a political discussion, wages in this country have been stagnant for over 20 years. And if people are not getting the increases in income to keep pace with inflation, which happens to be a bigger problem right now, then it's very hard for them to save for retirement. I have a lot of sympathy with those who are really pressed to be able to do that. But look at the bottom note, 58% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, including 30% of those making over 250,000. I mean, what are they doing? You know, I try not to be judgmental, but it's a question. And I can remember working with a couple. They both made very big incomes, and they were saving. They were in their 40s, and they were saving nothing for retirement. They were saving nothing for the children's education. They didn't have a cash reserve. They were spending it all. And I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars between the two of them. And if you ask them, well, where is the money going? They didn't really know, you know? So I started looking at their credit card statements and, well, I'll get to that later. Christine? So people oftentimes say, well, if I don't have enough money saved, I will work in retirement. Now, I think a lot of people understand that in our country, a lot of people over age 50 are finding it hard to get back into the workforce. If they never left, then okay, maybe their employer will let them stay longer to make up the gap, or maybe they'll never find. And actually, the statistics show that people who have lost their jobs after 50, when they get another one, they never make the same level of income, and they've lost time in savings. So the question is, how realistic is this plan to work longer in retirement? Next slide, please. Here is the thing. Some people, and usually we used to, in the business, we used to call it the do-it-yourselfers. They were very good at making projections themselves and studying investments and so forth. But the bulk of people are not that great at doing that. They're distracted by the everyday issues of a family, a job, commuting, and what have you. So they don't spend a lot of time on the computer calculating things for their retirement. The thing that works best for most people, and let's just say middle America, people who have income of some kind, and have time to save for retirement, they would be benefited by having a written plan. And that's what I did when I was a financial advisor. And I'm not selling my services because I've been retired since 2010. But having a plan that shows every goal that you want to reach financially and what it will take to get there is a lifesaver for people. That is the true retirement strategy, and going to a broker and just investing in stocks or other things, that's not retirement planning. That's not financial planning. And a lot of people don't understand that. So my experience is, and that to me, this is the key to retirement savings, is a written plan so people can see what it will take to reach their goals, and with automatic deductions out of monthly income to fund those goals before they can spend it. I know that might sound a little Simon Legree here with the whip, but that's what works for people. If they don't get their hands on the money, it tends to fund their goals. And not just through a 401k, but through other savings vehicles. And so anyway, Chris, I have covered a lot of information quickly. What are your thoughts about what I've shared?
Well, I think, I think the big thing is that comes out is two things. One is the importance of planning. And of course, you adjust your plan as circumstances change. And, someone who's in their 30s making projections for what life's going to be in their 60s, is reasonably abstract, but when they're in their 50s, it become much more concrete. But planning, I think, is absolutely key. But that's true in anything in life, whether you're starting a business, whatever it is you're trying to do, planning always helps. The other thing is that what I'd say is that the importance of saving, and we're talking about retirement savings is important, but the fact of the matter is it's not retirement savings, it's the importance of savings. And whether that's going to go for your retirement, whether that's going to go when you lose your job, whether it goes because you have to take a year off from work because a child is ill and needs to be taken care of, or you have to take care of an aging parent. I mean, there's caregiving, there's all kinds of reasons. So I really think what's important is to be thinking about savings. And then the advantage of retirement savings is that it's tax advantaged. And you can also make it automatic. And that's why if your employer offers it, it's automatic. You do it, you participate in it, you're signed into it automatically, and you have something at the end of the period of time. And because it's pre-tax, you actually don't really see the difference very much in terms of what ends up in your checking account at home. And so the other thing, though, is off what Rosemary was saying, is it's very easy to automate your savings. You just go online with your bank or your credit union, and you just say on the 15th of the month or the 20th of the month or whatever it is, that I would just like a small sum of money to go automatically into a savings account. Nothing very exciting at first, not exciting at all. There's very little there. Compound interest sounds like a joke right now, even with the slight rise in rates that we've been seeing. Nonetheless, what it does do is it does build over time. And if you think all about personal finance is nothing but a handful of good habits. There's no real rocket science here. There's nothing particularly complicated about it. It's actually, though, it turns out in life, the simple things are the hardest things to do. The simple things that we know we should do. Everybody knows they should be saving. I mean, we grow up, even if your parents didn't save, they told you to save, right? That's just part of the zeitgeist. So I think, what I take away from all of these things is it's the importance of savings. It's the importance of being careful with debt. Most of us are not going to be able to send a kid to college without taking out some debt. Most of us can't buy a home without taking out a mortgage. But just because we take out a mortgage doesn't mean that we have to have a second or a third mortgage. So it's about being reasonable with your debt, be automatic in your savings. If your employer gives you options for savings, take advantage of them. And we're starting to see with large employers, there's beginning to be a movement, and I think it's going to grow only the next couple of years, to help their workers set up emergency savings plans. Because if you saw what they've now done in the last two financial crises, 2008, 2009, and then with the pandemic, they loosened the rules on taking money out of your 401k. And you could take your money out of your 401k, and you could, if you get it back within 3 years, for example, with the current rules, there's no penalty, there's no taxes taken out, there's nothing. But everyone kind of recognizes that's not a great way to get at savings. But if you look at the typical household, if they have savings, it's in retirement savings. So now what companies are starting to do is, how do we set up an emergency? So a little bit of a paycheck will go into an emergency savings fund. We have no control over it. You tap into it whenever you want to. And you're starting to see that movement. I think that actually will help out a lot of people.
Thank you, Chris. Karen Roberts, a board member for Encore, shared with me an article from Bankrate on alternatives to 401ks, particularly if you are self-employed. So we already know that not everybody has access to a 401k. But as I think over the last 10, 15 years, it seems to me that a lot of people have forgotten about other vehicles for saving for retirement, unless somebody calls it to their attention. So, for instance, the traditional IRA, I wonder, Chris, how many people are funding an IRA, a personal IRA,
It's
in
a very small
addition?
number. It's a not, yeah, but the people who are funding it are well off. So
Okay.
typically the people who have a traditional IRA are the better half of the spectrum, income
Okay.
spectrum.
Okay. So everybody knows you get a tax benefit by funding a traditional IRA, but also there's the Roth IRA, which you don't get to deduct the contributions. But that gets at what Chris was saying. Rather than taking money out of your 401k to buy a home, you can take money out of a Roth IRA without penalty to
As long
buy.
as it's the contributions.
Excuse me?
You can't touch the earnings. You can touch your contributions. So
Right.
you put 1,000 in, you can touch the 1,000. But if that 1,000 earns, say, $500, you don't want to touch the 500, or you would owe taxes on that.
And it's also been my observation, and this is particularly true here in Florida. We have a lot of people who are self-employed. And after the pandemic, there are even more people who are self-employed. And maybe a lot of people have gone into a business funded with their retirement money. But if you're self-employed, you can also have a SEP IRA. It's a simplified employee pension IRA, and a solo IRA. And you don't hear people talking about it much. It's almost like, unless you're working with a financial planner, a lot of the people who are self-employed that I have met are not funding a SEP. Yeah. Or a solo 401k.
Yeah, and the SEP is probably for most people, for most self-employed people, is probably the best. You can put a lot more money into a solo 401k. The problem is most people who are self-employed aren't earning the kind of money that makes that, that important. And it's a little more expensive. SEP IRA, financial institutions won't charge you to open it up, whatever is their annual fee or whatever. But SEP IRA is simple, straightforward. You can set it up with any financial institution. And so I just think I'm a big advocate of it. And I think a reason why a lot of people who are self-employed, particularly people who are starting out, they're struggling to pay the bills. And so the notion that they're going to be able to put some money into a SEP IRA, but this is where you get down to open it up, put $50 or whatever is the minimum, and usually it's like $25 or $50. Put in the minimum, and then when it makes sense that you can start tossing money in there again, automatically go right ahead and do it. Maybe it's $5 a month, but at least what you're doing is you set up your own automatic system. You can always raise the amount that you put in there.
Thank you, Chris. One of the other things that surprised me when I was working with clients, and I don't know that anything has changed, that a lot of people who actually had jobs and were funding 401ks, but had a spouse that was not working, did not understand that they could have a spousal IRA for the unemployed spouse. And since that's usually women, but not necessarily, I can tell you that I met with many couples, spousal IRA is it held in the name of the spouse. So if there should be a divorce, a parting of the ways, whatever, that spouse still has that as a benefit for their retirement. And so if the dollars are there, which of course is the big question, then they should be taking advantage of that too, to make sure their spouse is cared for in their retirement also.
Yeah.
And so we've covered a lot quickly. Did you have anything else you wanted to say, Chris, about retirement saving vehicles that we haven't mentioned?
No, I mean, I think the main thing is there are a lot of vehicles out there. And again, the reason why I keep talking about these state-sponsored plans that I would like to see expanded throughout the country. But there are only a handful of states that have them right now. Is this reality that you want to make things simple for people? And
Amen.
we all age, we all want to save for our retirement. I think as a society, we want people to have retirement savings when they get older, because it increases their freedom of choice and their just provides them with a certain amount of financial and economic security. And so I just think, it's how can we institutionalize it as much as possible. And then I do think for the self-employed, for the small business person, they're the SEP IRA or the solo 401k. Either one is a really good option. The solo 401k, I think, is more for businesses that are going to have a pretty high income stream, pretty high revenue stream, and it's truly a magnificent way to save. And the SEP IRA really is designed for the person who's self-employed, doesn't really want to think about this too much. They just want to be cost effective, have a simple system, and but you can still sock away a fair amount of money. So again, I think something that you said over and over again, and it's really important, is as young as you can or whenever you can, automate your savings, automate it broadly. And then you can get more complicated, you can get more engaged as time passes. But the real key is to automate savings from when you get that first dollar.
Young people particularly, of course, can benefit for it. When I was working with younger people, I'd show them the cost of waiting and how compounding can affect things. And I've never forgotten the young person who I think was in their 20s and said, well, Rosemary, I want to retire by the time I'm 40. And I looked at him and I didn't really say what I was thinking, but we could do a projection that would show you how much you need to save and invest to achieve that goal. And when I did, they looked at me and said, I can't do that. A lot of people are very unrealistic. And I have a number of friends with children and grandchildren who, want to help them and understand these things. But a lot of people, they're kind of just wandering through life. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah, but I do think, you think about 80% of people 65 years and older own their own home. People have managed, people get by, people figure these things out. And I think home ownership is actually a very big bedrock also toward a retirement savings system, which doesn't get counted because it's not, it's not an income, it's an asset and all these other things. But, I think people stumble through, people figure it out. I think what we're all talking about is making it simpler and making it better and making it in a way that you're not as much psychological pain, worried about whether or not you're going to run out of money, which, by the way, very important. You don't run out of Social Security dollars. So that is actually the longevity insurance portion of Social Security is incredibly important, since you don't know what your end date is going to be. And
Before
your
I
insurance.
forget it, Bruce, I just want to point out that a person can be employed full-time with a company, be saving in their 401k, and can have a side business that they're also have a SEP IRA as
That's right.
another savings vehicle. A lot of people do not understand these things, and that's why they need to work with, as I said, a financial planner, not a broker who's trying to sell stocks. Stocks have their place in retirement planning. Investments have their place in retirement planning, but it shouldn't be the first thing. The plan, the projections of what will it take to reach your goals should be the first step. Do you agree, Chris? I
Yeah.
come
I mean,
down hard on that.
Yeah, no, I think, I think, again, I think planning is always good. Planning and research is always good. And in anything that you're doing, I was talking to someone recently who was thinking they wanted to get into own a fourplex and become a landlord. And I asked them, well, have you talked to any landlords? And they hadn't talked to any landlords or gone to any landlord meetings. There are landlord meetings all the time in any local community. And it's like, okay, do your research first before you take this chunk of money and find out, and the thing is that always strikes me is that if you ask questions, people will always be very helpful with information. Landlords will tell you what they charge. They'll tell you what their issues are. They'll tell you what the advantages are. They'll tell you their strategy because, that's like people like to share information. So I think it's whether it's retirement savings or starting a business or whatever it is, owning a home, you're always better prepared if you plan for it and you've done your research. And then the other thing is that I would also add is always think about what's the downside here. If things go wrong, if I'm making a projection and it doesn't go right, how vulnerable am I really? And think about the downside. It's fun to think about the upside, but you also want to take into account the downside in case things go wrong. How vulnerable are you?
And when on that note, I can't help but remember, I'm sorry to say this, the real estate crash of 2000 and 2008, when people invested in real estate, which is not a liquid asset, rather than saving, rather than creating an emergency reserve. And, a lot of people suffered terrible losses back then. So there's a place for everything in your plan if you have enough money. And in the time we
Chris,
have left, does anybody have any questions?
Just unmute yourself if you have a question. Anyone? We have a few comments that we did get. A thank you for providing the information. And I know Kathleen had a couple of comments here, and Angela said someone explained compounding to her in her 20s and sold her on the idea. Fortunately, she started saving at 24 years old, now trying to convince her millennial friends of this approach. Okay, Kathleen said automatic savings is the key and imperative for most employees. And I see there's one new message. Rebecca said, thank you. I've learned a few things. Okay, does anyone have a question while we still have Chris on the call?
Christine Sal here.
Hi, Sal.
Hey, Christine. Thank you, Rosemary, and thank you, Chris. It's a great refresher for me being a 30-year planner, I guess I can call myself that. Not as much a question as a comment. And that is, numerous times throughout my career, we found a way to free up some money. And it has to do with taxation or paying taxes or filing your tax return improperly in the form of the wrong types of dependents would lead them to come home with $5,000 or $6,000 at the end of the year, or 10, and they feel proud about that. They'd actually feel great. Hey, I'm getting this $8,000 return. Well, what are you going to do with it? Well, we're going to go on a vacation. We're going to cruise. And it's simply an adjustment, right? So it goes back to why park your money with the IRS interest-free, and I don't have to go any further. But this is basic education that's never been taught. And so those, I've had many experiences, but thank you again. It was a great refresher. You did a wonderful job.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I can testify to the fact that when I was young, nobody ever told me all these things. I had to learn them when I was quite a bit older. It's never too late to learn something new. And we're all capable of learning more. So I thank you, Chris, once
Thank
again.
you. Okay. Thank you
for
very
the
much to everybody. Thanks for participating. Appreciate it.
And thank you everyone for coming, and go on our website. We have archived our past Zoom events, our newsletters, all kinds of things on our website, encorepbc.org, and look forward to seeing some of you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Chris.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for
Thanks a
being
lot.
Thank you,
here.
Chris.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you.